Hi, everyone. I'm Vikrant Agarwal. I go by Vic. I'm currently a lead product manager at Zynga. And today we're going to be talking about PM and analytics in the gaming industry. So let's talk a bit about the agenda for today. We're going to start off with talking a bit about my journey, where I went to grad school, how did I go from the banking and consulting industry all the way to the gaming industry, and how I arrived at Zynga today. And after that, we're going to talk a bit about product management 101, the strategic side of what a PM does, the analytical side, and some typical questions a PM faces day to day. For this talk, I am going to assume that people are familiar with common acronyms, free to play, MMO, FPS, generic gaming terms, so that, it makes the talk a little easier. But yeah, having said that, let's just go ahead and dive in. So the first thing you see here is actually the logo of my website called geeksmirage.com. And it's a really interesting story that when I started in the consulting and banking industry and I wanted to break into the gaming industry, everybody used to tell me that, Vic, when we meet you, we can see that you're obviously passionate about games and that you really enjoy working, you would enjoy working in the industry as well as enjoy playing them. But we only get that after we chat with you. We don't see that in your resume, which all talks about banking analytics. So how you should share your passion with everybody. And I'm like, how do I do that? Do I start a YouTube channel? Do I start a newsletter? And then eventually I landed on a blog and I named it geeksmirage.com because there's more than one facet to a geek. And that's where I chronicled my entire journey and how I got my dream job in the gaming industry. So if you have time and want a super long read about how somebody changes careers, go to my blog. And I think it's the second post down. So that will give you a lot more information. But other than that, I'll give you a quick synopsis of my journey so far. So in this slide, you see where I went to school and, which companies I've been a part of. I actually studied engineering during my undergraduate days, and my master's is actually in computer security. And once I was studying that, I said, I really want to go into consulting because I'll be able to work in a lot of different industries. And during my consulting and banking days is where I found my passion for analytics. Now, remember, this is, over a decade ago, so analytics was still in its infancy. And, you really couldn't go to school for analytics at the time. And it's something you learned on the job. And when I worked on it, I'm like, I really enjoy using these numbers and relating them to products. But I want to work on a B2C product that I care about, that consumers use day to day, versus, B2B product that enterprises use. So during that journey, I found the tech industry, being a techie, I knew I loved that. But it happened that a friend's friend was actually somebody who worked in gaming. And I was like, wait, this is a real job? You can actually work in games? That sounds amazing. And at that time, I had no idea what a product manager was or what a project manager was. What's the difference between the two? I'm like, I work on a product. I'm a manager. I'm sure I'm a product manager. I realized later that it doesn't work that way. But after lots and lots of interviews and guiding from peers and mentor, I found my dream job at EA Games. And there I worked on a MOBA called Dawngate. I worked on a flash game site called Pogo. And that's where I really started understanding what it meant to be a product manager. So on Dawngate, I was actually the lead analyst. I took my analytical skills in one industry and then used them in another. And that's how I made the transition. And then through my journey, I'm like, okay, I like this PM thing. I want to dive more into it. That's when I went to work at DNA Games, working on some different kind of CCGs or collectible card games. And that's where I did all the basic things a product manager does, follow the strategy, run the live operation, design events and characters, look at the bottom line, understand how a P&L works, all the basics of a PM. After that, I'm like, okay, I think I really like this PM things and I really enjoy working in live ops. I want to do more of this. That's when I went to MZ and or Machine Zone. And a lot of you may have heard of some of these titles, Game of War, Mobile Strike, Final Fantasy Mobile. These are huge behemoths in the gaming industry. A couple of these were in the top charts. I think Game of War and Mobile Strike were top three, for years. So these are some really fun games to work on. It was a lot of work and, a lot of live operations spend that we had in the company, but a lot of things that I just enjoyed working on. And then after I did live operations, as you can see, for a few years, I'm like, okay, I know how to launch a game and I know how to work post-launch, but I really don't know how to make a game from scratch. And that's when I went to Amazon Games and worked at Twitch Prime as well, really understanding how does a game get made from scratch? How do you design a game from nothing? You have to come up with the concept, you have to come up with the first few levels and the iterations. How do you do something like that? That's something I did at Amazon. And after completing this holistic journey, I was kind of ready for the next big thing. And that's why I'm here at Zynga nowadays in the central product team. So, that is a lot about me, and we covered a lot about my journey. But what have I really learned from this so far? And what can I help people understand about product management? That's what we're here to talk about today. So let's go into that. As you can see, this is a really common definition for a product manager. It's somebody who's at the intersection of tech, business, and UX. But this doesn't really tell people what does a PM do day to day. And that's what we're really here to cover. So what does a gaming product manager do? A gaming product manager takes care of three things. The first is the strategic. What game do we want to make? Why do we want to make this game? What are the competitors like? What are they doing? What is a big differential? How are we going to be different from everybody else in the market? That's the strategic side of a gaming PM. The second is the execution. Okay, we know what we want to make. So what size of team do we want? Okay, now we know what size of team there is. How many levels do we want in the game? What is it that we're going to design in pre-production versus production versus soft launch versus worldwide launch? What are the different things we're going to execute on? That's something you look after. And the last part, and a really important component of being a PM, is leadership. A PM leads by influence, and it's not only within your team. It's not that you ever talk with the art team or the engineering team. You have to do that, but you also have wider influence across the company. You may have to talk with legal, with finance, with marketing, with security. So there's a lot of different teams you need to work with, and it's all leadership by influence. So that's a really important part of being a gaming PM. Now, when I tell people about being a PM, they're like, that sounds great, but I can be a project manager, right? That's very similar. Well, not really. And there's so many different terms. So I'm hoping, in the next few lines, I can explain to you what the difference is and, which one you should aim for depending on your interests. So for a product manager, I already covered that a little bit, the strategic, execution, and leadership side. But a project manager really deep dive into the execution portion of that. They work day to day with the engineers and the engineering managers. They make sure that everything is working properly. They're generally the Jira masters. They make sure all the tasks are assigned, everything is being completed on time with the quality expected. And they're the ones who keep the trains running on time, so as to speak. This is the primary person a PM works with. A project manager in the gaming industry is called a producer. So the PM and the producer are kind of like best friends. You talk every day, multiple times a day, because the PM is looking, after the strategic vision and the leadership, whereas for the execution, his partner for this is the producer. So that's something that's really important. It's a really important role at a studio. Now, a program manager is a little different. A program manager generally looks after multiple products or programs. So they look at things at a much higher level. So a PM may look like, oh, okay, we developed this level, we have a new character. Whereas program manager looks at it at a much higher lens. Okay, what is the next big milestone? In 3 months, we want to be ready for soft launch. Does the team have all the components they need? Oh, they need some more help from marketing. Okay, I'll speak with the head of marketing and make sure they get the support that they need. So a program manager looks after multiple products at a much higher level of vision. And then the last part is a PMM, or a product marketing manager. Now, a PMM sits on the marketing team, and there are generally two types of PMM. There's those who work after brand marketing, and then there's those who look after user acquisition or performance marketing. So they focus mostly on the marketing component. That's why the extra M is there, and they're PMMs. So hopefully that helped explain a little bit of the difference between a PM or a producer or a program manager or a PMM. But sometimes it's confusing and company dependent. So for example, at Microsoft, you have program managers, but at Microsoft, it's all the same. Program manager can be a product manager or a project manager or just a PGM. So it is company specific. That if you're in the gaming industry specifically, if you say PM versus producer, that's the most common delineation, followed by PMM and then PGM. So, hopefully that helps a little bit. But what I'm going to focus on today is the game PM, since that's my background. So we already spoke a bit about strategy, but what does the game PM strategize about? They look after something called AERM, and that stands for acquisition, engagement, retention, and monetization. So this is what PMs call the funnel, and this is what they look after. So acquisition deals with getting players into the game. Engagement is, do they have something to do? Retention is, okay, they have something to do, but will they come back day after day to do that thing? And monetization is, okay, after they're enjoying playing your game, what's the business component to your game? So you always have to look after the whole funnel. And to dial into the engagement and retention and monetization side, you look at the features and design of the game. Do I have a FTUI or a first-time user experience? Do I have retention mechanics, something that players will enjoy coming back in day after day? And then there's the live operations. Okay, they have a main thing to do every day, but how do you keep it fresh and interesting? Oh, I have a new event this time. Maybe I have a tie-up with a movie. So that's something you just keep changing in your game to keep it dynamic. And outside of the strategic part, there's also the technical part, which is the analytics. You may do a lot of good stuff, but until you can measure it, there's really no point to it. So what do you look at in analytics? That's something we're going to cover in just a few minutes. So I have a question here, which I'd like to share with you all. And it's something I did as a PM a few years ago. But everybody knows about battle royales today. 2 or 3 years ago, it was a red ocean dominated by a few successes in the market. Most of us have heard of Fortnite and PUBG, and there's a few other top games as well. So at that time in the industry, my friends and I would talk about this all the time, that if you're making a new game today, should you make a battle royale or no? Right? You can see, they're all different. There's some are PC console, some are on mobile, some are free to play, some are paid. Right? Some have, really high Metacritic scores over 90, some are in the 80s. The MAU or the monthly active users ranges all across the board. You see there's 3 million and you see there's 38 million or 49 million. So it can make a really big difference. And the same thing in revenue, right? We see there are people, who make about 240 million. It goes up all the way to billions. So it's a wide range of games. So the question always came in, would you make a battle royale today? Yes or no? And I had a few thoughts about this that I'll share. So the first thing is, when you look at game titles, you always remove the top few titles from the chart because they're runaway successes. And when I say remove, I don't mean don't think about them at all. I mean, you should learn from them, right? Fortnite, PUBG, Apex, they did something right. So we should learn from them, but don't compare them in your benchmarks because they totally skew it. And then I hear people say things like, oh, Fortnite made $4 billion. If I make a new BR, even if I make, 25% of that, I'll make $1 billion and I have a top grossing game. Well, it doesn't really work that way, right? There are some of successes. They did a lot of things right. A lot of people don't know Fortnite existed long before Battle Royale came in. That was just an extra mode they added. They were actually a PvE or player versus enemy game in which you just fight against computer generated enemies. And it's only after PUBG took off that they added Battle Royale, and they are the success that they are today. So you don't compare to the topmost one and say, oh yeah, I do 10% of that and I'll be great. You look at them for inspiration, but for analytics, you want to remove the successes on the outer end. The second part is thinking about what makes them so popular. So for Fortnite, one of the things was the accessible art style. PUBG, has its core audience, or COD has its core audience, but Fortnite really appealed to everybody because it was just so accessible. And the second part was it's competitive. You have a lot of casual games and people enjoy playing them, but a competitive game really brings out the competition in people, and they want to be the best, which makes them play more and grind more and, want to rise their way to the top. So that's something that people enjoy and leads to higher engagement and retention. And the third part, which I don't know whether it was by design or not, but it worked really well for them, is the teen virality. The game went viral amongst younger people, and they really enjoy playing it all the time. And younger people, they're not going to be spenders in your game, but they're going to really enjoy playing your game, and they're going to get it out there, and they're going to talk to their friends, and their friends will talk to their friends. So once your game becomes, word of mouth popular, you start hitting the top charts, and it becomes a great success. So these are some of the things that work really well on them. But then when you compare it to other games like Apex, you're like, what makes Apex so popular? And they had such a unique marketing strategy that one fine day in February a few years ago, They just launched it with a few top streamers, and everybody's like, "What's this game?" And I was like, "Hey, I used to be at EA, and I didn't even know about this game. This is amazing!" And everybody wanted to check it out. The top streamers were talking about it, and that really helped them build kind of that viral marketing side, which Fortnite did in a different way. So there's no one-shot answer, but these are all good things to learn from. So moving on, we already spoke a bit about strategy. Now let's talk a bit about analytics. I'm not going to go into super detail. The idea is to give you some thoughts behind what does a PM look like and what are the different kind of things they look at. And then after this, you can figure out, do I want to be on the PM side or do I want to be an analyst and take my career that way? That's the difference we're trying to illuminate here. So the first one is the basic things that a PM looks like every day. DAU, daily active player. How many players are in my game today? And the second part is the monetization side. So I have so many people in my DAU, but what's the average revenue per daily active user, or the ARPDA? So these are just simple measurement. There's nothing you can take away from them. There's no analysis here, but these are the basic metrics a PM looks at day after day. So these are metrics at the game level, but once you start diving in deep, you start looking at game metrics saying, oh, how many players completed a particular level or how many players bought a particular character, because you want to monitor these day after day to look for anomaly. They can be good, they can be bad, but you want to monitor these. Now, after the basic monitoring stuff, you start segmenting, and this is where the real meat comes in, and you really start analyzing some things. So, for example, for spend, you want to group it by different player cohorts and how much they paid. So, $5 to over $100, and then you can add another slicing based on player age. So, how many people spend $5 and have been in the game for over 6 months? They're not very high peers, but there may be people who've come in the last week and have spent over $100. What do they do? And maybe we want to do more of that. So those are the kind of things you look at. And then sometimes you start doing some deep dive analysis. You're like, wait, we released a new character and we saw a lot of people buy it, but they're not really playing it. Why is that? Is it because they don't like the art? Is it because it's too complicated? Or is there some other reason? So those are some of the deeper questions you answer so that you can really make something that players like and enjoy playing. After that, then you sometimes get into the math of it. So I'm not sure how many of you are familiar with the term ELO, but this is a rating system that is used to rank chess players, and that's how it became popular. And it's really important in games, especially multiplayer games. So for example, imagine you're a new person on Fortnite, and Fortnite doesn't know if you've played FPSs before or you've played Fortnite on a different account before. So they don't know whether they should match you up with experts or absolute newbies. And it takes 5 to 10 games to figure out how good a person is. The problem is that if you place a really high-level player with low-level people, he's just going to decimate and kind of get bored, and this game is too easy. But if you place a newbie with expert, they're going to lose every game, and they're going to be like, this game is too difficult. I don't want to play it anymore. So it's a really important problem to solve, and it's not something you can do easily. And that's where data scientists come in, where they look at complex machine learning models, trying to figure out what's the easiest way to combine 20 different variables and figure out the right ELO for a player really quickly. The next thing, we already spoke a bit about the AERM funnel. That's something PMs do every day. And the last part is A/B testing. Now, this is something that's the bread and butter of every PM, because we only know what we know. We don't know what players will like. So, if I'm doing a sale, should I put 100 food in the warrior bundle or 100 wood? What would players like better? Or, let's make it more complicated. I have an event coming up. I can give some gold coins for that. I can give 2,000 or 3,000. What would players like better? Well, obviously 3,000, right? Everybody likes coins. But will that lead to higher event completion? If I give a few extra coins in that this time, does that mean that more players will complete the event? Because that's what I want. I want them to see the reward at the end. So will that work out? I don't know. So that's when you A/B test it. You put 50% people in variant A and 50% people in variant B, and you see how it performs. And if it performs well, you do it for everybody next time. Or sometimes you do it on a vertical slice. You do it for only 10% people because you don't want to impact everybody. And then if it works well, then you do it for everybody else. So these are the different kind of tests that you can do. And to deep dive into analytics, there are three different roles at a high level. One is marketing, a marketing analyst, and they look more at the performance marketing side. Which channels are we getting new people from? Is it Facebook? Is it Google? Is it something else? So they really help number crunch that and optimize the acquisition side of it. Then there are game analysts who we covered, talk about, do work on the basic metrics, game metrics, segmentation, and analyses. And the last part is the data scientist, which, as we spoke about, help with more of the ML optimization and the A/B testing. So again, at a high level, these are the few different analytical roles that are out there. And now hopefully you have a better idea of what a PM does versus what an analyst does. So now that we're talking about numbers, here's another question that I have for you all. This is something that has happened to me more than once, and it's a real world scenario. It's also a real interview question. I've heard people ask this question in interviews. So it gives you a good idea of what PMs are expected to answer. So the question is, you come in on Monday morning and your manager says, oh no, the revenue fell by 50% last night. Look into it ASAP. It's 50% revenue drop. What do you do next? Right? You're kind of stumped. You're like, whoa, revenue fell half. I need to work on this right now. So where do you start? These are a few of the answers I've identified. The first and most important thing is the revenue still low or falling? That helps you identify the urgency of it. If it's not falling right now, you're like, okay, the fall has been arrested. I have the day to kind of deep dive into this and look into this and figure out why this anomaly happened last night. If it's still falling, it's all hands on deck. You're like, okay, how do we arrest this fall? How do we figure out what is happening and stop it? Right? The second thing after you've identified the urgency of the problem is the game working? You don't want your game to go down. So you want to make sure, is everything working? Are the new things you introduced last week working? Are the core features working? Is the store working? Are you able to engage with certain things in the game? You just want to test that out. Generally, I just call everybody around me. I'm like, hey, everybody log into the game, try playing it, try it at your different levels, try making a purchase. You want to make sure everything is working as intended. Then you start looking at the data. You're like, okay, now what is the DAU like? Right? Is it as simple as, oh, yesterday we had, X thousand players and today we have, Y thousand players, which is a little lower, and that could just address lower revenue. Oh, that's not the case. Okay, what sales did we release in the last day? Maybe it just was a sale that wasn't popular. Oh, nothing new. Okay, what about the payers? Maybe, it's just that the payers aren't here today. Yesterday, we had 1,000 people paying. Today, we only have 500. Maybe it's just that we've done nothing wrong. Just, it's seasonality and people haven't shown up today. Oh, okay, it's the same number of payers as well. Maybe it's the same 1,000 payers, or not the same, but maybe it's another 1,000 payers we have here today. But they're not paying the same. Yesterday, the $10 sale was the most popular, but today it's the $5. So your revenue has just halved. After you've looked at all these basic things, and there's many more you can look at, then you start looking at, more wider factors. Maybe it's user acquisition. Every day I get 1 million people from Europe and the US, and today it's from another country where, people don't pay that much. Maybe your engagement has gone up, but your revenue went down. So is that a possibility? Are there any drops in the install funnel? Those are the kind of things you can look at. And I asked this question to a colleague a while ago, and they're like, wait, Vic, did you check if the analytics system is reporting properly? And I was so focused on the game, I never thought about the system. So I put that on here as a point number 8. So there's a lot of different ones. I'm sure you can think of a few more, but that gives you a good idea of the way a PM thinks. And I'll end with a more fun question. So, again, another Fortnite question, because they are the leaders in the industry, with a top-notch game. But what do you think of the Fortnite Battle Pass? Do you think it's good or is it bad? And how do you think it helps Epic? Again, this is a real world question. PMs, I talk about this with my friends all the time. This is also, it could be an interview question because, you want to understand how a PM thinks about things. If somebody comes and say, oh, I think the Fortnite Battle Pass system is great. That's how they made $4 billion, right? That's not really comprehensive, and it just goes after the answer. What's your thought process? So this is the way I think about it, right? Go through your AERM funnel. So what does a battle pass help with? Is it conversion, monetization, or engagement, right? Does it help conversion? Take people from non-payers to payers for the first time. Does it help with monetization? Does it help make a lot of money? Or is it engagement? It gives people some goals? It gives them something to drive towards, that I've completed part one of the battle pass, part two of the battle pass, and they want to get to the end. So which one does it address? So in Fortnite's case, they have a really large user base. So if you take the raw numbers, if they have a 50 million MAU or monthly active users, and just one person convert at $10 each, which is the price of the battle pass, that's $5 million a month. That's a lot of money. So you can't just say that, oh, it's a great monetization mechanic. $5 million is so much money. Yes, but that's because they have a really high, uniquely high DAU. So I would say a battle pass is mostly actually used for conversion and engagement, and not really for monetization, because it's only $10, right? And after $10, they're not really spending on anything else unless they go to the store. So it's kind of a one-time it's a one-time monetization event until the next battle pass comes back. So I would say it's definitely more towards conversion and engagement versus pure monetization. But then they did some great design where you get battle pass is only 950 V-Bucks, but $10 gives you 1,000 V-Bucks. Now you have 50 V-Bucks over. What can you do with it? Apparently, not a lot. There's not a lot of things you can buy for 50 V-Bucks, which probably convinces people to be like, oh, let me spend $5 more and get a few hundred V-Bucks more so that I can buy this new skin or this new vanity piece. So that's how they get people to purchase again and again. And speaking about vanity, right, that's one of the most important things about Fortnite, that is not pay to win. I can't buy a bigger gun than everybody else, or I cannot buy a boost that makes me 20% stronger. No, everybody is equal. The only difference is that you can change the way you look. So you can change your skin, you can change the emotes you use in the game, you can use llamas, but that's pretty much all you can do. So keeping it on vanity and not making it pay to win is a really big part of Fortnite's success. And the last part is the pitch that, hey, you can not only enjoy the battle pass, you can make your money back. So you pay 950 V-Bucks to get it, but if you actually complete the whole thing, you get 1,300 V-Bucks. So you spend $10 and you actually get almost $13 back. That sounds amazing, right? That I can then just keep getting each battle pass for free after paying a couple of times. That's amazing. Well, what people don't realize or look into is that the battle pass is designed in a way that the first 80% is a little easier to complete and the last 20% is really hard. But those that actually complete it and complete the grind, it's worth it to them, right? They enjoyed playing a game and the game rewarded them for that. So it's a win-win on both sides. And if you want to read more things like this, there's some really popular websites in the industry that we all talk about and read. One is called deconstructoroffun.com. So they deconstruct a lot of games. They go into a lot of depth. It's not a half-page analysis. It's like 5 or 10 pages. So they get really, really deep. And they talk a lot about the industry as well. So I've learned a lot from there. And the other one is called GG Digest. They actually send out digests with the top links in the industry, the top news that is happening. So it's a good way to keep abreast of what's happening in the industry. So I highly recommend these two websites and that you should sign up for those. So that's mostly it from me. If you have any additional questions, there's my LinkedIn. Feel free to reach out to me. You can search for Vikrant Agarwal or Vic Agarwal. I'd be happy to hear from you. And if you have any questions, feel free to shoot them my way. That's it from me today. Thank you very much.